You are a disgrace to the values you pretend to stand for. The room froze. Cameras stopped panning. Even the moderator blinked in disbelief. Zohran Mamdani had just said those words, calmly, clearly, and directly, to Nigel Farage on live television, during what was supposed to be a tame policy debate. The tension was thick, electric. Farage, visibly rattled, chuckled nervously and leaned back in his chair, but his eyes gave away what his smirk tried to hide. He had not expected this. Not from Zohran. Not here. Not like this. What had pushed the usually composed Mamdani to erupt like that? What truth had finally boiled over, refusing to stay buried beneath civility and talking points? And why did millions of viewers feel, at that very moment, like something real had finally cut through the fog of performative politics? To understand how we got to that line, a sentence now etched into internet history, we have to go back just 48 hours. It all began with a leaked audio file. The clip, barely 90 seconds long, made its rounds across Twitter, Telegram, and WhatsApp like wildfire. In it, Nigel Farage was allegedly heard mocking South Asian immigrants, calling them pet projects for liberal guilt, and sneering at what he called token MPs who couldn't point to marks from a mugshot. The accent was unmistakably his. The language? Blunt, ugly, unmistakably racist. But as usual, Farage claimed it was doctored, AI manipulated, a smear. His base clung to that defense, but one man wasn't having it. Zohran Mamdani, New York Assembly member and the son of Ugandan Indian immigrants, didn't just issue a press release. He demanded a face-to-face debate, on air, with no edits, no delays, no safety nets. For many, it sounded political suicide. Farage was a seasoned broadcaster, a rhetorical brawler. But Mamdani was after something else. He wasn't coming to win the debate. He was coming to expose the rot. The debate was scheduled for prime time. Public interest exploded. Headlines screamed, "Mamdani to face Farage over racism row." Twitter became a war zone of hot takes. And yet, when they finally sat down under those harsh studio lights, no one could have predicted how much deeper it would go. The first 20 minutes were polite, at least on the surface. They danced around policy, Farage throwing out buzzwords, Mamdani parrying with facts. But the audience could feel it. Zohran was circling something, like a shark under the surface, waiting. And then came the pivot. "So, Mr. Farage," Zohran said, tilting his head slightly, "you've built your career convincing people that immigrants are the problem. Do you feel proud, knowing that your words have emboldened racists, split communities, and turned neighbor against neighbor? Or is this just another performance to keep your name in the headlines?" The moderator tried to cut in. Farage tried to laugh it off, but Zohran kept going. "Let me tell you something," he continued. "I've walked through neighborhoods where your rhetoric isn't theory. It's fear. It's vandalism on mosques. It's kids being told to go back to where they came from. And when I hear your voice mocking people like me, like my parents, like the people I represent, I'm not just angry, I'm done being polite." And that's when he delivered the line. "You are a disgrace to the values you pretend to stand for." No shout, no theatrics, just a cold, cutting truth that landed like a hammer. The studio was dead silent. And outside, the world erupted. Clips flooded TikTok. YouTube titles screamed, "Zohran destroys Farage." Reddit lit up with discussions. Some were skeptical, others stunned. But no one could deny it. Something about that moment felt different. It wasn't politics. It was a reckoning. If you're still watching, do yourself a favor. Hit the like button. And if you've ever wanted to see what courage looks like in politics, you're going to want to hear what happens next. Within hours of the debate, Zohran Mamdani's name was everywhere, from morning talk shows to international headlines. But while social media praised his bravery and spine, The backlash came just as fast. Nigel Farage's media machine shifted into overdrive. His allies labeled Zohran a radical Marxist, anti-British, even dangerous. The Daily Mail ran a headline that screamed, "Immigrant politician tries to silence free speech." Zohran, of course, had done nothing of the sort. He had simply called out hate with clarity. But the spin was relentless. News programs began replaying the debate clip with slanted commentary. Farage doubled down in follow-up interviews, claiming Mamdani came for a character assassination, not a discussion. He painted himself as the victim, a man of reason under attack by the woke mob. And to the surprise of no one, the narrative worked, for a while. What they didn't count on, however, was the tape. An anonymous source uploaded a raw, unedited version of the original leaked audio to a file-sharing site. This time, the clip was longer, 5 full minutes, and it left no room for spin. Farage wasn't just mocking immigrants. He was laughing with donors about keeping the brown ones busy with diversity panels while we do the real work. His voice, his tone, crystal clear. And Zohran? He didn't gloat. He didn't retweet. He went quiet. For a full day, he said nothing. Then he posted a simple video. Just him, in a quiet room. He looked tired, but steady. "I'm not surprised," he said softly, "because this isn't about one man caught on tape. This is about a system that rewards division and punishes truth. This is about what we tolerate, about how we let power get away with poisoning our society in plain sight." The video went viral, not because of fireworks, but because of its calm fire. No editing, no background music, just a man looking straight into the lens, refusing to look away from the truth. Within hours, the media tide began to shift. Even outlets that had rushed to defend Farage began to backpedal. Journalists started asking real questions. Who leaked the tape? Why had it been covered up? How many times had similar language been swept under the rug by editors and producers who thought, it's just Nigel being Nigel? Meanwhile, Zohran's inbox overflowed. Messages from teachers, immigrants, even ex-Tory voters flooded in. "Thank you for saying what we've wanted to say for years. My daughter watched you speak. She cried. I never thought someone like me would be represented like that on national television." And yet, even with the surge of public support, Zohran faced the political cost. He received threats. Fake news sites published smear pieces about his foreign ties and communist agenda. A deepfake video of him burning a British flag circulated online. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was war. But Zohran stood firm. He began organizing town halls, not in New York, but in London, Birmingham, Bradford. Places hit hardest by the same politics of fear Farage had ridden to fame. At first, the idea seemed absurd, an American politician rallying British working-class communities, but people showed up, hundreds at first, then thousands. He didn't campaign. He listened. He asked questions no one else was asking. How many of you feel like your fear is being weaponized? When did being safe become more about skin color than school funding? Why are you told to blame immigrants when it's billionaires hiding money offshore? And they answered. Mamdani wasn't just reacting anymore. He was leading. It wasn't about party lines or passports. It was about breaking the spell of division. It was about reminding people that dignity and truth could still matter. The scandal had exposed Farage, but what followed was revealing something bigger. A hunger. A crack in the armor of old politics. A new voice, not from within the system, but one brave enough to call it out from both sides of the ocean. And if this story is resonating with you, leave a comment. What would you have said to Farage? What line would you draw in the sand? Sometimes one sentence changes everything. But what comes next? That's where true change lives. 3 weeks had passed since the debate, and Nigel Farage had vanished from the public eye. No interviews, no statements, just silence. And in his place, a flurry of headlines about internal investigations, cancelled appearances, and perhaps most damaging of all, former allies publicly distancing themselves. But Zohran Mamdani wasn't celebrating, not even close, because while Farage was retreating, something darker was brewing. Protesters began showing up to Zohran's events, not peaceful ones, organized, uniformed, aggressive, British flags, torches, shouting slogans that barely concealed their rage. Go home! American Marxist, get out! Don't speak for us! Zohran didn't flinch. In Birmingham, he calmly stood on stage as men screamed inches from his face. In Manchester, he walked through jeering crowds to meet a single mother who'd taken 2 buses just to say thank you. In Glasgow, he paused his speech to offer water to a protester who had collapsed. That video alone told the world what it needed to know. Not because of what Zohran said, but because of what he did. But back in the shadows, a smear campaign had begun to escalate. One morning, the UK tabloids published a scandalous photo. Zohran at a 2013 protest, holding a sign that read, "Abolish ICE." The headline? Radical American wants open borders for Britain. The irony was lost on no one, but that wasn't the point. The point was distraction, discredit, defame. What they didn't expect was the response. Zohran didn't apologize. He didn't deflect. He took to the BBC, live, and said, "Yes, that's me. I stood up for people being ripped from their families. I still do. And if you think that makes me unfit to speak about justice, then maybe ask why you're more outraged by a sign than by cages." The studio fell silent. Again. And once again the public responded, not with fury, but with reflection. Letters poured in, some angry, many thoughtful. A retired soldier wrote, "I disagreed with your stance on immigration, still do, but I respect that you say what you believe, not what polls tell you to." But while Zohran was facing down smear campaigns and disinformation, a deeper problem emerged, one that caught even him off guard. He was being followed, not metaphorically, physically. A black SUV parked outside his temporary flat. The same 2 men in different cities, subtle but unmistakable. The harassment had crossed a line. Still, Zohran refused extra security. "If I let fear change how I walk through this world, then they've already won," he told his team. But privately, the toll was mounting. Friends worried. His mother called daily. And during one quiet evening, while reviewing speech notes alone, he received a chilling email. No text, just an image. A photo of his parents' old house in Kampala, taken recently. The message was clear. But Zohran wasn't alone anymore. By now, activists, organizers, and even some journalists had started tracking the network behind the threats. A rogue shell company tied to former Farage donors, anonymous IP addresses pinging from the same Russian server farms that had meddled in other campaigns. It was deeper than hate. It was organized. And still, Zohran pressed forward. He appeared before Parliament, invited not as an American politician, but as a witness to hate-driven disinformation. His testimony was sharp, personal, and deeply human. This isn't about left or right. It's about fear being turned into fuel, about truth being silenced by volume, about the kind of world we leave behind if we decide that lies are just a price we pay for power. The room was stunned. Across the UK, something shifted. And still, Mamdani never claimed to be a hero. But whether he liked it or not, people had begun to see him as one. Because sometimes, a leader isn't the person with the most votes or the loudest mic. Sometimes it's just the one who refuses to sit down when everyone else says play it safe. And if this moment has meant something to you, just hit subscribe. Not for an algorithm, but because we need more people who think like you, watching stories like this. It was raining in London when Zohran Mamdani walked into the Royal Albert Hall. The night wasn't political. At least it wasn't supposed to be. It was a charity gala for refugee education. Dozens of public figures were in attendance, celebrities, donors, diplomats. But all anyone could talk about was him. Not a British MP, not a media personality, just a New York State Assemblyman who had somehow become the moral compass of an entire scandal. People whispered as he walked in, respectful but curious. A few clapped. A woman in the corner wept, not because of politics, but because in Zohran they saw a kind of hope that had long felt extinct. Nigel Farage, meanwhile, had just released a video from an undisclosed location, denying any wrongdoing and accusing foreign interference of hijacking the UK's democratic discourse. His voice trembled. His tone was scattered. It wasn't a defense. It was a spiral. The scandal had taken its toll. The man who had once controlled headlines with a smirk and a slogan was now ranting into a webcam, the internet laughing instead of listening. But Zohran didn't mention Farage anymore. He didn't need to, because by now, something much larger had begun to unfold. Student unions invited Mamdani to speak, not about immigration, but about integrity. British MPs, once reluctant to even acknowledge him, began quoting his lines in Parliament. One even called for a Mamdani amendment to require public investigations of hate speech by elected officials. It passed its first reading. And then the unexpected happened. A group of former UKIP members, yes, from Farage's own political roots, released a statement. It read, "We do not agree with Zohran Mamdani on policy, but we agree with him on decency. We've spent too long blaming the vulnerable for the greed of the powerful. That ends now." No one saw it coming. But maybe that was the point. Zohran hadn't won by attacking. He had won by enduring, by showing up, by speaking in a way that made even those who disagreed with him pause and listen. Still, the personal cost remained. He admitted in a rare interview that he had trouble sleeping, that he'd lost weight, that sometimes he wondered if it had been worth it. "But then I remember the faces," he said. "The kids who told me they feel seen, the parents who said they're proud to explain politics to their children for the first time, and I remember why silence was never an option." The journalist, normally hardened, just nodded. And perhaps the most profound moment came not on a stage, but in a small cafe in Hackney, where Zohran met an elderly man who had emailed him weeks prior. He had been a lifelong supporter of Farage. "I came here today," the man said, "to apologize. Not for my vote, but for never questioning why I was so afraid. You made me think again. And that, well, that's rare." Zohran shook his hand. No speeches, no cameras. Just two people, meeting where real change lives, in humility. This wasn't just the fall of a demagogue. It was the quiet rise of something else. A new kind of politics. One rooted in listening, in truth, in standing up even when your legs are shaking. And Zohran Mamdani? He hadn't planned to become a symbol, but symbols don't choose themselves. They're chosen when the world decides it's tired of pretending. He reminded us what courage sounds like when it's not screaming, what leadership looks like when it's not marketed, what power can become when it's grounded in principle, not popularity. So if this story stayed with you, even just a little, leave a comment. Tell us what moment struck you, or just say thank you. And if you're not already subscribed, do it now. Not for us, for the next Zohran Mamdani, watching in silence, wondering if the truth still matters. It does. And now they know it.